All right, Guru Nation, this is going to be a great interview, a great episode. I already can feel it because this Karina Ramirez, she's only been in the industry 14 months. She's somebody that I discovered, I think it was on my YouTube. She left a comment on one of the videos about how she went from medical assistant to regulatory affairs in 14 months, guys and gals. Not only not only is it theoretically possible for an MA to get into research or a CNA and move quickly career wise in the industry, but here we have somebody who's done it. And I actually don't think it should be that uncommon. It might be uncommon because MAs typically don't think about research, but we're going to learn all the ins and outs from Karina, what was going on through her head, how she did all that she did. Was it intentional? Was it on accident? Was it a combination? But thank you so much, Karina Ramirez, for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So your
So,
story is pretty cool. I mean, when you were in MA, did you ever think, "Oh, I'm going to do research, clinical research?"
no, I actually, because I already had my associates in business administration. I earned my associates back in 2011, but I had two more children. I have three children, but I already had my firstborn, and then I had two more children after that. So I was just basically a stay-at-home mom at that point because also the economy had really took a crap at that time, so I couldn't find a job, so I just stayed at home. Finally, when my youngest was old enough to go to school full time, I took the opportunity and decided, like, oh, I might as well go to medical assistant because that seemed like the most feasible. Everybody in my family is a nurse anyways. My mother was a nurse for 12 years, my older sister was a nurse for about 8 years, so it was kind of, it kind of runs in the family. So I ended up taking medical assistant. I didn't really want to be a nurse. I already knew that, but I kind of wanted to get my foot in the door for into healthcare. I was also searching for my bachelor's. So now I have my bachelor's in healthcare management. I earned it in August.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Oh man, that's been a crazy journey also. Um, so as I started working at medical assistant, I started off in women's health. I did my internship there. I got officially hired February 3rd. Started off in women's health, and COVID happened about 6 weeks later. Then they had me do, a front desk screening for people with symptoms. Um, they had RNs working at the clinic, doing their clinicals, working at the COVID clinic. Their session had finished, so they needed somebody to replace. So my supervisor came to me like, "Hey, do you want to work in the COVID clinic?" And I was like, "Yeah," because they paid. They also paid. What was that pay? That did they give you extra pay for working in the hazardous?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Time and a
Anyways,
half or something like that.
yeah, hazard pay. That's what it's called.
Hazard pay.
Yes, they gave you hazard pay. So I got paid about a dollar and a half more than what I was. So I did that for a good 5 months, and then a lot of changes started happening with COVID. It went from COVID testing to giving vaccines. So I was also doing that, and then
No
just
research yet. No research
not yet,
on this
not
one.
yet. It's not that far. I actually didn't get into research until a year after, but I'm getting to the point as quick as I can. Um, so after all that happened, they were talking about closing down the clinic, or it wasn't. COVID had already calmed down a little bit at that point, so they were getting a new physician. They needed somebody to take over minor procedures. Now, this is a very important part of me getting into research. So I got into minor procedures. They were doing a study called anchor study. So it's basically people living with HIV who may be at risk for developing anal cancer. Different from colon cancer. A lot of people want to, associate the two as the same, but they're not. So I was doing the procedures for that, but I didn't know it was for a specific study. So every time we had a patient come in, the people who were participating in the study, we had the research, it was a very small team. It was a team of 2 people. We would have people come up with a computer saying, "Oh, we're going to randomize." So I would start asking questions like, "Hey, like, what do you do with this patient? Like, why do we have to get certain information? Why is this significant? Why do I have to take these little pieces of tissue and have to, label them the way they do?" So I just started asking a lot of questions, and And then I kind of, where I was at, I was kind of overwhelmed with the procedures because I felt like I was just burnt out at that time. So I had actually resigned from that position.
Mm.
And I started at another job where I thought was going to be better, but it was like so much worse. I hated it. And
Wait.
then
So
they,
you were doing research at this
not,
clinic?
not yet. It was right
Okay,
after this. So I was
I
doing minor
see.
procedures for a research study, but I wasn't part of research yet.
You weren't part of research. You were just collecting like samples,
Yes.
and you kind of that was when you first started hearing about the concept of research, but you still weren't sure what that
Yes.
was. No one told you what it was. They just had you, "Hey, Karina, go collect that sample."
Yes, that's exactly
Yeah.
what happened. I didn't even know I was, doing this for a research study.
Mhm.
So I had left, and then while I was looking for another job, I had other coworkers who, I called they're consider them my friends. So they were like, "Hey, they have a research position that they just opened. We think you should apply." And I'm like, "Oh," at first I was like, "Nah," because I don't think I want to draw blood. I'm always getting scared, especially because it's a place where they specialize in HIV. Some of these patients aren't treated, so the risk of getting that as well was high. So I was a little bit hesitant. So finally they got on my butt. They were like, "Hey man, like you need to apply." And then one of my coworkers, who he was in the research, he was like, "We really wish you would apply. We think you'd be a good candidate." So I ended up applying. I did the interview. The manager liked me. I answered all the questions that they had for me because of the questions I had asked, while I was doing the procedures. So I started off there, but in this, so I finally got into research. They hired me, and this is where a lot of things kind of go crazy. So 3 months down the line, I was only doing clinicals at this point. 3 months down the line, my manager had got an opportunity with Cineos. So he resigned his position, and he was already kind of grooming me because I was already going for my bachelor's and kind of teaching me everything about research. And that's when I started watching your videos too, because even though I could only ask so many questions, so I watched your webinar. That 4-hour video probably took me like 3 days to watch it, and I have my notebook right here to watch it, and some of your other videos too, like with regulatory, because he was having me maintain those files as well. So as a being a small clinic, I was coordinating the study visits. I was emailing with the medical monitor, the CRA,
Wow. But
and
he
and there's
taught you this, like he taught you the basics, right? Like,
yeah,
or he just saw you as a MA with potential because you were also in the process of getting your bachelor's degree. So he really like introduced this idea of like, hey, you could be a clinical research coordinator to you.
yeah, yeah, and he's a really good guy because I told him what my goals are. Like, I eventually want to be in this position, and he was just like, I think he kind of took me under his wing,
Hmm.
and he saw that I was also good at problem solving. Like when I had my own studies, there was 5 studies we were doing, so I was assigned to 2 of them. The other 3, the other guy did because he knew more about it than I did, and the anchor study was more intense. So there was 2 other studies, but we were cross trained to know everything. So my manager basically did all the business aspect of it, but I was doing mostly clinical. But after he put his resignation, he was kind of like kind of showing me what he does on his part. So he even after he had left, I was communicating back and forth with him, and also it helped. Like if you communicate with the CRA, like, "Hey, like I don't know what to do in this area," you gotta ask questions. You gotta communicate with these people. That's the main thing with in any industry that you're in, is communication. So I asked the questions, I asked for directions, they helped me get through what I needed to get through. If I didn't know what a form was for, I would ask like, "Hey, what it was a 1572, or,
Hmm.
why do we have to submit this application to the IRB?"
We learned
So
all the ins and outs of coordinator life, and I'm guessing. So when you applied to this job, though, you didn't know it was gonna be clinical research, or you did know it
no,
was.
I didn't know it was clinical research. I just didn't know
Okay,
how much, what was involved in it. I just
I
knew the
see.
clinical aspect.
And
So
why did they want you? Like because you had like your friends were there and they recommended you, or
no, they just told me about it, but everybody knows me in that clinic. Like I worked my butt off, and I was efficient, and my work was quality.
Mhm.
So when it came to like medical records, updating the patient's
Oh, so you
chart,
were there before. That's the
yes,
same place you resigned from, and then you applied again.
yes, at that same facility. I
I
didn't even know that they
gotcha, I
had
gotcha.
research at that same facility. So,
I gotcha. That makes
um,
sense. So they
yeah,
already knew who you were, and they're like,
yes,
"Yeah, the Karina definitely could work."
yeah, my work ethic. They know my work ethic. So
Okay,
I
because I'm
was,
trying. I'm trying to help another MA out there who's watching. It's like, well, how did she do it? Like, what made her so special? So maybe how? Like, can you answer that question? Like, how could they do it, knowing what you know now? Let's say a MA is out there. Maybe they're working at a large clinic that doesn't do research. All right, like,
yeah.
how can they get into research?
Uh, what I believe is because I just put myself out there. I was always the first one to help out, even if I was, packed with work myself. If I had a little time in between, I was always like proactive, like, hey, I can do this. If I don't know how to do it, tell me, exactly ABC, like what do I need to do, and I'll do my best. If I have a question, I'll just go to you. But just it was just being proactive and good work ethic, and they saw that my work was quality. So yeah, so that's how it kind of fell into my lap at that point.
Hmm.
And then after my manager left, noticed that he started getting really busy too. So a lot of this other, business aspect of the research, I kind of had to, learn on my own, some of the parts. Um, but again, with help with communication and whatnot. So
So you
I had to.
basically learn like your day one there working with your manager. I'm assuming they gave you good clinical practice training to do.
Yes, I
Uh,
had to go to city, um, the city website, and I had to get my certificate for human subject research and good clinical practice research,
but
and
let's
then
be
my
honest, that doesn't
IATA.
help you learn anything really about the actual industry. It's just kind of tells you, okay, you got to respect patients, patient safety first, informed consent, but it doesn't tell you like practical things like, hey, Karina, we have a screening tomorrow. Like that GCP
Oh
is not gonna
no,
help you with that.
no, whatever you learn is completely different than when you're doing it on hands-on. Like even medical assistant, like my school, yeah, I did everything that they taught us, but there was like so much more to it when you're actually doing it. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and I believe you learn the job more when you're doing it hands-on as opposed to just reading about it. So,
Did your
um,
manager like just throw you in there and say, "Hey, here's a patient's coming in tomorrow. You're on your own," or were you like shadowing somebody until you get the hang of it?
I was shadowing the other MA who was in it. Like I said, we were just a small group. It was the research manager, the PI, and the two research assistants, just me and the other guy. So I shadowed him. Of First and foremost, I took the training, the city training. Then I did the shadowing, and then we had to get to the point where we had to create source documents. So,
Mm. So you
and
guys
for
were
the
using paper source?
yeah, so we really had to read because there was one of the studies, I believe it was called dynamic. So there it was finding a new class of medication. So they kind of contradicted each other, what they had on the website to how you should do the study visit as opposed to the paperwork that they gave you was kind of contradicting. So we went by, the book, and then when the site monitor came, they were like, well, why did he do it this way? We're like, well, this is how it showed us in this part. She's like, no, you need to do it on how we have it on the website. So
On the
we,
EDC, the EDC,
uh not the EDC, it was um I don't
like a
know, it
IRT
wasn't
or
their
something?
EDC. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so
Okay.
it was basically showing us, they also had their own each study had their own, videos and questions and tests that they did to make sure that you understand that's what you need to do for that study. Um so yeah,
That's
like I said, that's
interesting.
why you have to communicate with them because you could be doing something that you think is one way, but there's another source that's teaching you a different way, and then you're doing it one way and it doesn't come out right, and then the site monitor is like, what's going on, and
I
then
think
they're
this
the like,
topic needs to be discussed more. That's like why I wanted to have you on because I mean, you did it so quickly, but you're like a perfect example of somebody who, like, you can go from MA and you could advance very quickly. My first employee at Yuma Clinical Trials is a CNA. Her name is Desiree, and she's amazing. She's similar personality to you. Like, you seem like a self-starter, like somebody tells you once and then you figure out like, okay, this is how I'm gonna do it. And Desiree, she shadowed me for 3 months and now she does patient visits on her own. She solves problems on her own, queries, deviation, all that, everything coordinator does, data clarification forums, all that stuff, talks to patients. Would you say 3 months is about a fair time for a research naive MA or CNA to kind of get the hang of being a coordinator?
I would say so because I think I caught on a lot more quickly because I was already a CNA for 2 years at that point. So I already knew what to do in the clinical aspect. I just needed to know the order of assessments and then
Yeah.
exactly what they wanted.
What
So
about meds, like con meds? Like when you read that inclusion exclusion
yes.
criteria, did you have to like Google a lot to figure out, okay, is this med like part of what their protocol says? Like a lot of that stuff.
Oh, we actually went by for one of the studies, and I also use it for other studies too. Is the Beers criteria. So they would show like certain class of medications and what family, if they're benzodiazepines or psych meds or heart meds,
Mm.
that I was able to break it down easier. I was also more familiar. I was really familiar with a lot of medications, especially HIV. Like I said, we specialize in HIV, so most of our patients, were involved HIV medications and of course diabetes and whatnot. Um, and yeah, so I was pretty familiar with the medications, just some of the medications, you learn more. It's medical is always an evolving thing, so you're always learning about new things.
So from
So yeah,
CRC, then your manager left because he got a job with Syneos. So that opened up an opportunity for you to
I
take
was
on
actually
more.
no, I was actually looking for a job. So even to make things more stressful, not only did my manager resign, 2 weeks later the PI resigned. So we weren't
Wow,
even
the
sure if we were
PI
gonna.
resigned.
Yeah, we weren't even because my manager, he did all of her work for her. And
Yeah,
her the business aspect for her, so she just dealt with the patients, and she was also doing a lot of things. She's very high, in the medical field. She does like she publishes,
mm.
you know,
She's a key
um,
opinion leader. Sounds like.
yeah, and she actually was a spokesperson for the inject Cabenuva. She was one
Okay,
of the spokespersons for that. So
but
yeah,
she
so she
resigned just
resigned
because it wasn't.
because she couldn't handle all the work on her own.
I see.
Like I said, my manager, he was in research for 15 years. He conducted over 250 studies throughout
Wow.
his career. So he, I don't blame him. I'm like, they're
So you're
paying
brand
you
new.
good.
You're
Yeah.
brand new in this new role. You're finally starting to learn it. You like it. Your manager resigns. Your PI resigns. So what do you do next?
Uh, so uh so that's where things got a lot more challenging. So I just had to apply what I learned, what I have been learning with my bachelor's, and try to apply it to what I've learned in research. Even though they're a lot different, I can still apply some of what I've learned there. And then the other MA, he knew the ins and outs of most of the studies, so he helped me a lot, on that the clinical aspect of it. And then, because they had both resigned, the leadership there was like, "Oh, well, we're going to shut down the clinic. So at this point, you guys are overstaffed. So we need to let one of you go." Which I'm the
Wow.
newest one. The other guy's been there for 2 years, so I already know like they're going to let me go. So I was already looking for another job. I've had interviews, and I think I kind of botched those interviews because I couldn't answer the. I was still very new. So I didn't know how to answer some of the questions. So I did a lot more research, watch more of your videos, watch, some other research videos that were very helpful. I like your videos because they were a little more detailed, specific to what I was looking for. And
Thank you.
um, and
Oh,
let's see. Yeah, there's a lot to the story, so excuse me if I'm kind of like all over the place.
well, this shows you like, do you think, let me ask you a question for other MAs watching, or even clinics, there's two people going to watch this video, MAs or CNAs, or other research clinic owners like doctors that are considering hiring their MA. We always tell our new our new physician clients that want to start research in their private practice, because the issue always comes up of staffing. And I always tell them, Look no further than who's already in your office. Like, I'm guessing you have a bunch of MAs or CNAs there. Pick the one or two that you think have the most potential, like self-starter, learns quickly, willing to do a lot, like outside the box, like you. Essentially, they need to find their Karinas in the
Yeah.
office. So they're watching too, and they're probably thinking, okay, like, how do I do this? So in your case, like, how did you, because MAs in my office, when I talk to them, and I explain research, they say, "Well, how do you guys only see like 2 patients a day? How do you that sounds boring." They don't realize that it's like 4 hours of paperwork for every hour that patient's
Not
there.
even that, it's the recruitment takes the most time.
Recruit, you're right. You're right.
Yes, the recruitment takes the most time because
So do you
most
think
of
this
our
is good though for like every MA? Because some of the MAs in my office are like, "Ah, that sounds boring. We like just seeing patients every 5 minutes and that's it."
they need to do their research on research. Any kind of job that you're interested in, you really have to do a thorough investigation. And if it's for you, even regulatory, when I just thought about regulatory, but then I looked more into it, the work life balance, how does it change as you move up in position? Um, because I have, 3 kids, 2 of them are still young enough to where they do need me. So I can't be working crazy hours. And so they really need to look into research and see if they like it and see everything that comes with it because they may start it and then they hate it. The After I left, the girl who took over, she can handle the work. I hear that she's smart. She was able to handle the work, but she hates it. I think she just hates it because of there. I My experience was stressful after my manager left because he kind of backed everybody up, backed everybody off because they were making it like oh my god, it was just such a mess. The other we have sub investigators, but they were so overwhelmed with their primary care patients. It was hard for them to make time for the study patients. So trying to keep everybody in window and finding somebody to see them. The PI was only
Wow.
working part-time, so it was leadership made it hard, so it was really hard to do research. We got it done, we made it work. There's a lot of accommodation, a lot of communication with the CRAs and the site monitors and everything. It was
I
so
see.
stressful.
Because what's the
um
normal, let's say it's not clinical research involved, okay? Like just comparing traditional healthcare to clinical research. Same person, an MA, okay? Let's say there's no research. So what's the career trajectory for a typical MA? You go from MA to like maybe lead medical assistant at your large practice to what? Like what's the career ladder? Because we can compare it to the career ladder in research. And have a feeling there's like more opportunity in research, but what's typical career trajectory for a MA?
it's kind of hard to say. um because you're used to doing that one thing, and unless you have a degree you really can't move up too much, you know what I mean? Maybe again a lead CRA, or you can be the one training, but again at the facility where I was at, they weren't very you had a lot of opportunities to be in different department, but that's because they didn't pay you very much and they made you work, like they
Mm,
cracked the whip on you. So
mm.
um it was easy to get experience in other areas there, but from a medical assistant, unfortunately I think you would have to either get into research to move up, or
Get a degree.
get a degree. I have a cousin. She's been a CRC for 8 years. She started off getting paid only $12 an hour. Now she gets paid $30 an hour, but she's been in it for 8 years now. And she only has her MA. She doesn't have a degree or anything. So
But she
um,
knows the ins and outs of coordinating like no other.
yes,
So from there, you can
yes.
go site director. There's even cases of MAs, if you've been a coordinator long enough with no degree, no bachelor's,
Mhm.
they're CRAs too. Like there's
Yeah,
no rules in FDA that says you must have a bachelor's. It's bachelor education, sufficient education or experience. So they
yes.
really leave it up to the sponsors to decide.
Yeah, yeah. So it's yeah, because I when I looked at different jobs, I also noticed that too. They were like even so after after a while, I stopped looking for jobs because I was like, well, I'll just stay here until they let me go. And then, if I have to go collect unemployment, then that's what I have to do. But I was still looking. So after so many attempts and then a few interviews, and I know I botched like some of the questions, so I kind of just gave up. And then a research organization reached out to me through Indeed, and they were like, "Hey, we like your experience. We want you to apply." And I've only been in research 6 months at that point. Um, so I signed up. It happened so fast too. I had my interview with them. I spoke with the recruiter on Wednesday. She set me up with the interview for Friday, and then that same Friday they called me back and they gave me an offer, which you know um, with a little bit of experience that I had, the amount that I asked for, they were like, okay. They gave me a little bit more, and
Wow.
I was like, oh, okay. So and
Good
so
job. Good job on
I've
that.
been with them for 6 months before a, a third party recruiter for Amgen reached out to me, and I'm just like,
What gave you the
uh,
confidence to ask for more? Like most people would have been like, you know what, I'm just happy to have this role. Like what gave you the confidence to ask?
oh, because this role specifically was patient recruitment. So I already, that was the thing I probably did the most consistent, at the small facility was patient recruitment. If I wasn't conducting a study visit, I was, communicating with patients all day to talk about, whatever study that they may be interested in. And, we do like a pre-screening through the because all the research patients we had were actually primary care patients in the facility. So it was easy to, for the medical records and all that stuff. So I asked them, I threw out an offer and they were like, okay, we want to give you this much. So they gave me, a few thousand more than what I asked for. And
Wow.
yeah, and then I was doing that for a while. It was such a good company too, such an awesome work-life balance. It was from 9 to 5.
And what was the role again? Recruitment?
Uh, Patient recruitment, yeah, specialist. And so yeah, so they had their expectations. It was a little slow at first because they only had a few studies recruiting at that time, but then they had the Pfizer Lyme disease study starting up, and that one
Mm.
like kept us really busy. So um, this is where I use my problem solving skills to help, my team, because we were broken up into different regions, the East Coast, Central, and West region, and then those regions were broken up into two teams. So we recruited, for the different studies, and their expectation for us, if we were speaking with patients, they wanted us to call at least 35 patients a day. If um, if we weren't speaking to any patients, then we would have the expectation of at least 50, phone calls a day, which I was able to meet mine. If they provided that amount of, referrals to me, then I would make those calls. It was also to a point where they wanted us to go through a script, and some people on our team was complaining like, hey, like, we don't know if we're going to be able to keep up with that. So I created a template, kind of like, uh, cut and paste and cater it to what I'm used to talking to with these patients. So I was like, hey, I created this template. I shared it with my
Mhm.
team, and then we were just knocking out the calls.
What are the
So
typical, now that you've talked to so many patients, or potential patients for studies, what are their main questions? Like, do you have to educate them all on what research is, or is it more about the therapy being tested? What's like some of the most common pushbacks you get or questions?
a lot of them ask about the potential side effects, and um, also the time of the study, like how long they have to participate, because depending on which study it was, the older patients, a lot of them are retired, they want to travel, so they really can't commit to the study, so they would ask questions like that. If it's 2 3 years, they're like, oh no, we're going to be out of the country, for 3 months at a time, and we're just like, okay, well, would you like for us to reach out to you for any future studies? So yeah, so a lot of it was time, and a lot of it was side effects.
Mhm.
And another question they asked a lot too, they asked if placebos were involved. So I got a lot of questions on that. So
Was anyone
um
hesitant that well, it's research. I don't want to be a guinea pig. Do you get that a lot?
um so from reading, so for my bachelor's, looking at healthcare law, I see all where a lot of research went wrong and why people, especially people of color, are hesitant to, participate because research hasn't been the most, you know, beneficial to, those people.
Yeah,
So there was more, Caucasians signing up whenever I spoke to a patient who was Hispanic or a patient who was of African American descent. I would start asking their personal information and they would just hang up. They're like, I think they just got uncomfortable and they
really.
didn't want to give too much information. Yeah. Like the Tuskegee,
Yep.
study that was,
So no
um,
question then, no question, Hispanics and African Americans are more skeptical.
yes, yes. I think also
And it
because
doesn't help that you're Hispanic, like to have that rapport on the phone, or it didn't make a difference?
no, I think it was more of the just the study itself. And then even at that, it goes a little deeper. Even like regular healthcare, Hispanic people really tend not to go to the doctor, even
Yeah, they
for
don't like
regular
it.
checkups. I
Yeah.
mean, they
Mm.
they don't go to the doctor unless something's already wrong. But I try to let them know like, hey, like this is preventative before something goes wrong. It's best to check on this and take care of it now. That's what I learned as a medical assistant doing regular primary care. Um but yeah, there's just so many different aspects. Some people already knew what research was. There was
Mm.
patients I had that they were in the medical field and they worked in research, so they were just easy to work with. They're like, yeah, sign me up. What's it going to take? What do I need to do? How far do I need to travel? What are the times available? So they were really easy. It's the ones that were skeptical and they ask a bunch of questions, and then you spend 20-30 minutes on the phone with them and they're like, no, I don't want to do it. I'm like, oh,
That happens a
okay.
lot. That happens a lot. What about MA coordinator patient recruitment at another company, like on a large scale, it seems like. And then regulatory affairs, how does that come into the picture?
So like I mentioned earlier, I had a third party reach out to me. They were recruiting for Amgen. So this was actually I'm going to be starting with Amgen on Monday. It is an entry level position and it's a contract. So that's
Congratulations.
thank you.
Wow.
So that's this. I actually lost sleep over this, this offer because I really liked the company I was working at, and they paid me well. The work-life balance was awesome. My coworkers were great. If I needed questions or if I had help, the people I worked with were awesome, and it was really sad for me because when I had put in my resignation, my manager was like, I am so disappointed. And I thought he was upset with me, but he was just like, no, like, I'm sad. Like, I know they wanted to offer me more money, but I explained to them, I'm like, look, like, although I really like this job, and I love everything about it. I think you guys are great. The communication's great. I did exactly what was expected, you know, um, I just love the company. So I know they wanted to offer me more money, but I had to explain to them, I'm like, look, like, regulatory, as you know, is a hard industry to get into. And
Absolutely.
and I explained to them like, look, like I'm not leaving for a better opportunity or better money. It's actually I'm just gaining the experience, and I'm taking a risk because it's just a contract job and I'm taking a little bit of a pay cut. So, you couldn't offer me more money, and then my supervisor came back from her vacation. She was like, what can we do to keep you? And I'm like,
They try to keep
but
the good ones. That's the problem.
yeah, yeah,
The good
because
ones get recruited. And did you get recruited through LinkedIn, or was it Indeed that you
link,
said?
uh, l- so I got recruited for the patient recruitment through Indeed, and
Okay.
then for the Amgen through LinkedIn.
So by the way,
So
Karina's LinkedIn is underneath this video. Um, Recruiters love getting after the guests that come on the podcast. But why did you move to regulatory affair? A lot of people might be watching and say you're crazy. Less pay after all that chaos that you just. It seems like you're finally getting stable. Why? I mean, I think I know why the answer. I think it's the right move too, by the way. But why? I want to hear from you. Like, why?
so this may be a little bit off topic. So ever since I was a kid, I always saw myself being a businesswoman. I never wanted to be a nurse. I never wanted to be a medical assistant. I never wanted to get into the medical field at all. Um, but after just a series of events happened in my life, and
I like you, Karina.
it
That's good.
just, and after having my associates for 10 years, like I already knew I wasn't going to get a job anywhere. I couldn't get a job as an accountant, not the secretary, not even an entry level there. So I went to school for medical assistant. They gave me the internship for my first job where I got hired. And I still wanted to continue business, but since I was already in the medical field, I'm like, well, why don't I go into healthcare business, so healthcare management?
Mhm.
Um, uh, Finding a school was a whole nother battle because accreditation for my associates, it was hard. I couldn't transfer to other school. That's a whole nother can of worms. So we won't talk about that.
What's another
Um,
podcast?
yeah. So finally, one of the schools, it was a sister company to the first college I went to. So my credits transferred over right, smoothly. So I started my bachelor's of healthcare management, and then, so while I was doing my health bachelor's, I was still doing the research. So, in the combination of my research experience and earning my bachelor's, the patient recruitment hired me with the expectation that I was going to earn my degree. Um, and
I see.
Yeah,
So
so
they were
I'm still in
investing in you.
business.
They were
Mhm.
investing in you basically for your not only what you did up until that point, you were like an easy investment for them because you did patient recruitment already, but they were able to get you like under market value because you didn't have your degree, but they knew that you would, and then they could probably promote you to other things. But you were like, you know what? I found this job in regulatory. I want to get into that. I think it's smart. The reason I think it's smart is you're becoming a generalist. So you're not just like honing in on one skill set, you're developing a repertoire of different skill sets all related to research. That makes you like the more of those skills you can attain, the more job security you have and the more opportunities you're going to get too. Like you can always go back to being coordinator now.
Yeah, but I think, like I said, I never wanted to be a nurse. And even though I did medical assisting, and I did enjoy it while I was there, I was already in my mind like, yeah, I'm not gonna stay doing this. Like, I don't want to keep doing clinicals. I'm over these patients. Even the patient recruitment, I liked it. I just don't like dealing with people sometimes. I don't
Hmm.
like dealing with headache patients. So even at that, I'm like, I kind of want to get away with dealing with people in that aspect. So I still wanted to stick to more of the business aspect, in a completely different place than what I thought I would be. I saw myself being like a manager of medical records or director of the facility eventually in my life. But now that I'm in research, I see myself in a completely different area. So
What do you
I
see like in research now? Like what's the goal? What's the 5-year plan for you for Karina?
so I would like to eventually go up to a regulatory management. Um, So I know obviously the pay is good, and I'm looking at, as my children get older, they're not going to need me around as much. And I know regulatory, sometimes you work crazy hours. The work life balance is unpredictable. So, eventually in the next 5 years, eventually move up to management. Director, I looked into it. A lot of people say like once you get into the director position, it's high stress and you're like going to be losing your hair at that point. I'm just like, I don't think I want to
Yeah.
do that yet. So I
Oh,
probably
you
won't
mean
do
like
that until
regulatory affairs, like helping sponsors decide, hey, this is like the studies you want to do, like this is the pathway you need to
yes,
take. Okay.
yeah. So basically, like being the middleman for between the FDA and the pharmaceutical company. So
That's good money. Very good money in that role.
yeah. And it's a
Regulatory
little bit
affairs.
intimidating too because,
Yeah.
I always separated research and medical as one is more medical and one is more scientific. So I am more, I know more about the medical part and I am not a scientist. So I'm a little nervous about understanding the scientific aspect of how these studies are conducted. The learning about the manufacturing process of the medication is going
Mm.
to be completely new for me too. So
GMP. Yeah, you're
yeah,
gonna go from GCP to GMP, then you gotta learn the different pathways, the 510Ks, the biologics, the
yeah.
prodrug pathway. There's a lot, and honestly, like you can spend the rest of your life in that niche and never learn it all because things change. Like biologics come out,
It's evolving. Yeah, it's
gene
always
therapy,
evolving.
genetic CRISPR is coming out. So wow, I could see why you chose that route, and it's huge. The entire industry supply shortage, but regulatory affairs can't
Yeah,
find these people. And like, really, once you get like 10 years into it, you can go independent consultant route, like have your own small
Y-
practice where you're doing this. I I I 2 years ago I was looking for a regulatory affairs consultant. They charge a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah, I was yeah, looking into the regulatory, jobs and positions and job requirements and everything.
Oh,
I made sure I knew what I was getting myself into because there's nothing worse than, I don't like when people apply for a job just because it's higher pay. If you're not passionate about it, you're not going to perform well. You're going to make yourself look bad, and it's not a good look. Um,
wow. Monday you gotta update your LinkedIn. So,
I
because your
am,
thing's gonna be up this weekend and people are gonna be reaching out. Networking is the next phase for you, I
yeah,
think.
I do. I try to network. I try to connect with as many people as I can. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, it's been a wild, it's been a crazy year for me in research. Even though I'm sad about this company, they told me like, hey, if it doesn't work out, you are a top performer. You can come back whenever you want. So I'm like, oh, awesome. So after this
Hmm.
contract, if maybe if I don't perform well or for whatever reason they let me go, or it doesn't get extended, I could always go back to my old job.
This role you just got, what is it, the official title again? The
A regulatory associate.
Okay, this regulatory associate, do you think if you didn't get your bachelor's degree, but everything else would have been the same, they would have given you the job?
No, no,
Okay.
because so when I when I spoke to the recruiter, they're asking me what's my expected pay. Because again, it was an entry level. They're looking for people who just graduated, who just completed their bachelor's, and they actually wanted to pay me, a lot less than what I was expecting. And I was like, hey, like as much as I want this job, I can't afford to take this much of a pay cut. So they kind of met me halfway.
Wow.
Um, so they obviously needed somebody, and they interviewed me. They liked me, so they negotiated my pay, and I was able. I only took, it's just a small pay cut, not much of a difference.
Congrats. It won't last long. You'll
Yeah,
that
so I'm
that
like,
niche that you're in, I predict 6 months or whenever your contract is up, when they renew it, it's a different story.
yeah, yeah, I hope so. So,
Even
they
if they
say
don't
it's,
renew it, somebody else will take you on at that point because
yeah,
it's
for
just
sure.
experience.
Yeah, and yeah, so getting that offer changed a lot of things for me. I'm missing out because this company that I just left, they actually had a winter shutdown. So you had from December 23rd to January 2nd, paid time off. Like there's
Wow.
no work. So I missed out on that, but I'm missing out on a lot of perks from this company that I left, but I'm just like, man, like you don't get this opportunity. They already came
No.
to me once before and I already declined them, but they came to me again. And I'm just like, it's a sign.
So why'd you
So
decline them the first time? It's just you didn't feel like making more like chaos, like chaotic move?
I wasn't, so I wasn't sure because I was with this company for only 6 months.
Oh,
And I felt like, oh, that doesn't really look good on my resume. I really like the company. There was a lot of things that made me decline it the first time.
yeah.
But then they came at me the second, and I already had an interest in regulatory. And before they came to me the second time, I was like, well, maybe I'll just get my experience here, and then I'll see if I can get into regulatory later on. But then there's also this fear that I have, and I don't think this company would have done that. But of course, it's always a risk. Being their top performer, I'm also afraid of if I want to move up, they won't allow me to move up because I pull in patients. No, that was also my fear, like being held in that same spot. I didn't want to be stuck. So it's just a lot of that's what I mean. Like I lost sleep over this. A lot of things were going through my mind. Was it a right move? I don't even know if I'm gonna like regulatory. I told this to my manager
Yeah.
and my supervisor, like, I'm taking the risk here. So
You are.
like I'm probably gonna hate it 6 months from now, but if I don't take these risks, you'll never know. I don't know where it could take me, 5 years, 10 years down the line.
It's
So,
interesting.
um,
The industry needs more people like you, Karina. This was an amazing story. I think it's the right move. And first of all, who cares what I think? Second of all, I think it's the right move. And if it's not, you can always go back to what you were doing.
Yeah, that's that's the good thing about your work ethic. If the people like you, then they'll welcome you back. So I already have my supervisor's personal information. Like I've already texted her. We communicate from time to time. So 'cause they really like me.
Hmm.
Um, and also on top of being efficient with my work, I had to pick up a lot of other people's slack. There was patients who were being called, demographics weren't collected, the pre-screeners weren't
Mm.
they didn't have the templates installed into the software, so we actually had to copy and paste, and I had to kind of tailor it to where it's easy for the coordinator to read. So I had to solve these problems myself. So when
You remind me of a archetype, like Desiree's in this archetype too. If there's people who do their jobs just to do it, and then there's people who do more than what they're asked or what they're paid to do just because. And I can't find out why that just because is. Like, why do you
uh
do more?
for me, because the experience is invaluable. Whenever I start into something that I'm interested in, I want to learn everything. Like even
So
as
it's
a
just a
medical
personal
assistant.
thing for you.
Yeah, it was you have to want it. Um, when I had left the small clinical site, I was trying to help them look for a replacement for me. So all the other medical assistants, they asked, what is involved, and they were like, oh well, that's too much. I'm not interested in that. But I'm like, there's good opportunities for this. Don't expect to move up just doing,
Mm,
rooming patients if that's all you're doing. You're
yeah.
not doing referrals or anything like that. So that was a little bit challenging because, there was a post that you posted. I don't know if it was one of the social medias where, the difference between the medical field and research is your medical field, you're overworked and underpaid, and research, you're
Oh,
overworked
yeah.
but well paid. And I'm like, that is
TikTok.
so true. I'm working just as hard as I've been working, but I'm getting paid better. So,
I'm trying to reach the TikTok. That's so, yeah. Wow, Curry. I'm so glad I interviewed you. We definitely have to keep following up. Um, and I think if you want to start networking more, we have it's open to anyone, all ethnicities, but obviously you're Latina. We have Latinos in clinical research that you're welcome to come to our monthly Zoom meetups and network with people. And maybe we'll even have you present one of these days because your story is amazing.
oh yeah, I would love to. Yeah, because like I said, I've only been in research 14 months, and
You've
it's,
done
it's, it's
more
been
than
crazy. It's
most
been
people do in
crazy.
5 years, in
Yeah.
14 months.
Yeah, but you have to be proactive. You have to go get it. You have to ask these questions. You have to make yourself be like, hey, I want this, let me know. And if they see that, you're competent and you're willing, then they're gonna pick you up. They're not gonna miss out on the chance of you,
Yeah,
to, get experience.
someone like you doesn't come around that often. So definitely, whoever got you is lucky. And Amgen, it seems like they're next. So, Karina, it's amazing. Everybody go connect with Karina. Her link to her LinkedIn is underneath this video, or if you're listening on the podcast, thank you in the show notes. I know a lot of you new people from TikTok, a lot of MAs and CNAs gonna be watching, listening to this one. So go connect with Karina. Forget about hearing it from me. Hear it from someone who actually did what I'm saying. She's a medical assistant now doing regulatory affairs. Yeah, she had to get her bachelor's, but that doesn't mean if you don't have a bachelor's and don't have plans to get your bachelor's that you can't also elevate your career in research. It may not be regulatory, but there's a lot of opportunities here. So thank you so much, Karina. Any last words of encouragement, maybe for other MAs or CNAs trying to get their break in this industry?
Um, really work on your resumes. Work on your resumes. Whatever you learned in research that you have learned, apply that to your resume. Even if it's just medical assistant, make sure you put in detail your transferable skills and what your capabilities are. Another thing with resumes is do your bio. Tell them what you want, what you're looking for, and you know that'll catch their attention.
That's such good advice. Transferable skills and that bio. Please, guys, stop putting cliches in your bio. Like, I know I just said you were self starter and all that, but don't put that in your bio. everybody knows. Of course, you can present yourself. What you want to put is like practical things you've been doing. Like if it's
Yes.
patient recruitment, if it's creating source, if it's like things like that, where somebody's gonna know, okay, this is something real. It's not just a great team member. Like those are
Yes.
cliches.
Yes, actually, if you guys look at my resume on my LinkedIn, I'm very specific
I
on,
see it. What the
yeah,
heck?
yeah,
This is the Yeah, patient recruitment specialist for clinical trials with previous experience as a clinical research assistant, conducting multiple studies in oncology and infectious diseases, looking to be more involved in regulatory affairs. Now you're gonna change it. Yeah, this is amazing, Karina. You've got yourself like the next 5 years mapped out. Um, can't wait to do a part two. Can't wait to get you on Latinos in clinical research to discuss more and network with other people. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to future podcasts.
That's right. Everybody, go connect with Karina right now. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Catch you all later. Bye bye.
Bye.